I still look up at the sky when I walk through the park each morning. The breeze brushing my forehead, the quiet warmth of the ground beneath my feet. These are the small, quiet proofs that I'm still alive. 40 years ago, being alive felt more like a sentence than a gift. That day, the doctor at the university hospital didn't even make eye contact. His words were measured and cold. You likely have about 1 year left. Just like that, the world around me shut down. My ears rang with silence. My heart felt like it had stopped. And as I sat alone in the backyard that night, staring at the stars above, one thought wouldn't leave me. I have too much left to do to let it end like this. From that moment on, I knew I had to fight. As a father of two, a husband, and most of all, as a man who still had things he wanted to do. It was death knocking on my door that made me realize real life doesn't start in a hospital. It begins on your kitchen table. This story isn't about some miracle cure or secret supplement. It's about 5 ordinary foods, so common, in fact, that we've come to overlook them and how they brought one man back to life. I'm sharing this because maybe, just maybe, someone out there is living like today might be their last day. And if that's the case, I want to help you start again as if it's your first. Part 1. The day I was told I had 1 year left. Hello, friends. Tonight, I want to talk about one moment, just one, that can change a person's entire life. You may be sitting on your couch or lying in bed, unwinding from a long day. But have you ever thought that a single sentence, a single look from a doctor could keep you from making it to your next vacation? So before you settle in, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm sharing with you here. When I walked out of the hospital that day, the sky wasn't cloudy. In fact, the sun was gently shining. Ironically, it was the darkest moment of my life. The doctor's lips trembled slightly. He stared down at the floor. "Mr. Anderson, based on your scans, it looks like you may have about a year left." It felt like the ground disappeared under me. My ears filled with static. Time stopped. If only this was a bad joke, I thought. But there was no humor in his face. It was stage 4 liver failure. The cancer had already spread. There was little modern medicine could do. As I left the exam room, I leaned against the hallway wall, trying to stay upright. My legs felt too thin to carry me. Breathing was hard. Even the automatic doors at the entrance looked colder than usual. Each swish of those doors felt like another piece of my life being ripped away. I drove home in silence and sat down right under the family photo in our living room. In the picture, the kids were laughing. My wife was leaning into my shoulder with her usual warm smile. And I just clenched my fists. There was nothing I could do to stop what was coming. And that helplessness hurt more than the diagnosis itself. "Why me?" I whispered, but no answer came. Growing old isn't just about aches and pains. It's about collecting a quiet sort of wisdom. That night, I realized something. Everything I'd worked for, retirement plans, travel dreams, time with grandkids, was built on one fragile thing: health. So I made a vow to myself that night. I'm not going down like this. Did you know that the liver can't feel pain? It suffers in silence. Most people only find out something's wrong when it's too late. I had regular checkups, never drank, heavily exercised. But my liver had been slowly collapsing without a sound. That's the cruelty of liver disease. It's the silent organ. I decided I would not go quietly. I pulled every bit of knowledge I had, decades of studying natural medicine, old herbal texts, nutrition journals, even folk remedies. I was ready to try anything to stay alive. Here's a fun fact. The first book I grabbed was an old traditional Korean text called Donggi Bogum, kind of like their version of a centuries-old holistic medical encyclopedia. In it, there were notes on the best foods for healing the liver, right down to the temperature and timing of meals. Turns out, modern science has since confirmed much of that ancient wisdom. I remember stopping my car on the way home from the hospital. I couldn't even make it into the driveway. I sat there for half an hour frozen. In the back seat was my daughter's coloring book. On the passenger seat, my wife's groceries, bananas, bok choy tofu, and a bag of dried seaweed. Funny, isn't it? One of the keys to saving my life was sitting right beside me all along. We spend so much of our lives chasing big answers, we forget to notice the small ones already within reach. That night, I decided to start looking closer. Part 2. Shattered Routine and Family Tears. That night, I didn't sit down at the dinner table for the first time in years. My wife simply watched me, silent and stunned. Our kids slipped away to their rooms, trying to be quiet. In that hush, my mind felt like it was filled with thousands of voices screaming at once. Should I tell them, or just keep it to myself? I eventually chose silence. I told them, I'm just tired tonight. I'll go to bed early. That was all. Then I closed the door behind me. The bedroom was always cozy, but that night it felt unnaturally cold. Even under the blankets my wife had nailed on the line, I could sense a chill. I pulled them over myself and lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of my life plans collapsing in slow motion. Camping trips with grandkids, sunsets by the sea, peaceful retirement in a quiet countryside, everything shattered like a slow-motion film on a white screen. One of my oldest philosophies came rushing back to me then. Grief when spoken becomes tears. Grief kept in your heart becomes illness. That night, I refused to become sick with grief. So I went back to the family photo on our mantle. The smiles of my loved ones felt more distant than ever. But that very distance jolted me awake. I realized I had to reclaim those smiles. I had to fight with everything I had. Dawn came, or more accurately, it was still before dawn when I quietly dressed. I slipped out to the neighborhood park, still empty in the early dark. It was a place I used to frequent. I sat on a bench next to some old exercise equipment, and finally I cried. No sound, just tears. Imagine a 51-year-old man crying silently in a park before sunrise. Sad and kind of absurd, isn't it? At that moment, it didn't feel absurd at all. Now I often tell myself, if I hadn't cried, I might already be gone. When I went back home, the first thing I did was pull every book off the shelf. Old lecture notes, research papers, herbal texts. I gathered every resource. I had focused on one mission: I will survive. If that sounded like superstition, so be it. What mattered was that it gave me hope. I asked myself 2 questions. Is there a way to restore my liver? And what have I been missing all these years? Here's something that astonished me. The liver is incredibly sensitive to temperature. Do you know that a drop of just 1 degree in body temperature can reduce liver efficiency by more than 30%? That's why I made keeping my body warm a daily ritual: ginger tea, warm water, thick socks, and a few minutes of stretching each morning. Every day I stood before the mirror and told myself, "You're okay. You're still alive today." The power of thought is stronger than most of us believe. Doctors call it the placebo effect, but I experienced something more real. I called it the physics of self-belief. Something beautiful happened. One day, my wife saw my notebook filled with names of foods, scribbled notes, and ideas. She quietly flipped through it, then said, "I'll do it with you." I didn't realize how much that meant. A marriage is two people sharing life and death too, if need be. I also made plenty of mistakes. At first, I tried everything at once, mixing different herbs, juicing odd combinations. One day, I got such an upset stomach that I spent more than an hour in the bathroom moaning. I wrote one note that still makes me laugh. Good for healing, but first your stomach needs to live. Amid all that trial and error, one thing became crystal clear. The real answer always lies in simplicity. A month passed. I still avoided booking another hospital appointment. I wasn't ready to hear anything more. But something changed. Waking up in the morning no longer felt scary. I found myself looking forward to it. That was my body quietly changing and hope returning. When we have hope, we welcome dawn. And I found myself falling in love with the early morning air all over again. Part 3. Discovering a small resolve from despair. People often ask me, "Do you believe in miracles?" I say yes, but miracles don't always come roaring in. Sometimes they come quietly, like the cold shock of washing your hands in icy water one morning. Quiet, certain. That morning felt ordinary. It was 6 a.m. As usual, I woke early. In the living room, my wife had already put the coffee pot on. She sat beside me without a word, watching as I opened my laptop. That day, I encountered a single word that might just save me: fucoidan, and with it, my real journey began. Fucoidan is a gel-like compound found in brown seaweed. Research suggests it may support the regeneration of liver cells and slow the growth of cancer cells. At first, I scoffed, but after reading studies from Japan and clinical trials from the US, I felt ancient herbal knowledge and modern medical science finally shaking hands. From that day, I began my own experiment. I soaked dried kelp, blended it into a fine extract, and took 1 teaspoon on an empty stomach every morning. My wife teased me, "Why are you drinking pond scum?" But I just smiled and replied, "I'm reviving the ocean inside me." That kelp extract became my first weapon in this fight. Then I added perilla seed oil, powdered shiitake mushrooms, ginseng extract, and fermented soybean paste. Though each food supported the body in different ways, they shared one quality: they acted slowly but clearly. And because of those 5 foods, I lived 40 more years. People often ask, does that really work? I want to ask back. Have you taken just 1 teaspoon every morning for 40 years? Here's an interesting tidbit. Perilla seeds are rich in plant-based omega-3, and some studies show it's actually absorbed more effectively than fish oil. That reversal is well known in academic circles. Turns out, perilla might be smarter than the fish, but the benefit went beyond science. My wife started blending perilla powder into yogurt, and after about 2 months, she said I feel so much calmer than I used to. I quietly laughed. Then how jumpy was I before? Of course, mistakes were part of the journey. Early on, I boiled shiitake too long, destroying the beta-glucan compounds. Once I learned that, I switched to finely powdered dried shiitake stirred into warm water. The taste wasn't great, but behind the bitter flavor was healing. Maybe life is like that too. The sweet moments fade, but the bitter ones linger where they count. One day, I visited my old professor from graduate school. He was 15 years older than me, still poring over ancient medical texts. After hearing my story, he said softly, "Young man, defeating disease isn't about drugs. It's about convincing yourself." I still hear his voice today, because behind every inexplicable recovery, there was always mind. Eventually, I began to feel lighter, my breath less labored. Mornings no longer felt like a battle. When I washed my face and looked in the mirror, I thought my skin looks clearer. Maybe it was just wishful thinking, but it mattered. I'm getting better. That belief was stronger than thousands of pills. Then I stumbled on an article about fermented soybean paste, known in Korean cuisine as doenjang. It spoke about gut health and immune cell activation. It felt like finding a hidden treasure, though I admit the smell was hard to swallow, so I mixed it with banana juice. Surprisingly, it worked. In today's world, health foods have to taste decent too. One funny thing, after drinking that paste each morning, I found myself visiting the bathroom more often. My wife just laughed and said, "You gotta clean your gut daily, or it'll go stale." That turned out to be a truth. So those 5 foods became the start of every day. 1 spoonful each kelp extract, perilla powder, shiitake powder, ginseng, and fermented paste. And in that morning ritual, I held on to my life. I no longer waited for miracles. I made them every single day. Part 4. A fateful encounter with 5 foods. Every morning, I made sure not to skip those 5 foods. With each spoonful, something small stirred inside me. It felt like recovery, a fight, a quiet rebellion. A rebellion that didn't happen in a hospital. It started in my kitchen. Breakfast became more than just a meal. It became ritual, a declaration I choose to believe in my body today. I finally understood that the simplest things often hold the greatest power. We ask, does this really work? But our ancestors have used these ingredients for centuries. It wasn't science they lacked. It was memory. Or maybe respect. When I prepared shiitake mushrooms, I used to think, this is nothing. But as I soaked them in hot water, the aroma took me back to my childhood grandmother's farmhouse in the countryside. She dried mushrooms beside ancient clay jars in the quiet sunlight. Medically, shiitake mushrooms contain beta-glucans, which activate natural killer NK cells, our body's front line against cancer and viruses. But for me, more than the science, shiitake revived memories within me. I once shared this during a lecture. One student raised her hand and asked, "Professor, why doesn't the hospital teach this?" I paused and replied, "Medicine treats diseases, but meals handle life itself." We both nodded quietly because it was a truth too simple to ignore. And then, one day, I decided to return to the hospital for testing. The tests were thorough blood work and scans, and the doctor's expression hardened. For a moment, I braced myself for despair. But then he said, "Mr. Thompson, your liver enzyme levels have improved significantly, and the tumor has shrunk a bit." I was speechless. Even the doctor looked stunned. "Did you take any other treatments?" he asked. I answered softly, "I've been eating seaweed every morning. People talk about fate or miracles. But what I want you to know is this: a miracle can start with a single spoonful." It sounds unreal, but it's real. Every day, we make choices that either harm us or heal us. What we eat, how we sleep, how we think. And among them, eating is the most immediate. My morning routine was simple: a spoonful of seaweed, extract, perilla seed powder mixed in water, shiitake powder in warm water, a spoonful of ginseng, concentrate, and finally, mismut jung fermented soybean paste stirred into banana juice. These 5 foods became like a prescription, wrapping me in care. One day, my wife looked at me and said softly, "You seem brighter these days. Your eyes, they look different." That comment was worth more than swallowing 100 pills. One of the greatest changes I noticed was how fatigue disappeared. Before, I'd feel sleepy after lunch or out of breath climbing stairs. Now, I could teach a 2-hour class or hike the local hills without issue. That wasn't just better fitness, it was evidence something was truly alive inside me. Some friends said, "That's too much trouble." I'd reply, "Do you have time to be sick?" It may sound like a joke, but it's honest. The time spent waiting in clinics, taking pills, worrying about side effects, it all adds up. Spending 10 minutes each morning on a ritual felt more human, more life-affirming. Most importantly, this habit taught me one philosophy: I know my body best. Doctors and prescriptions matter, but ultimately the final choice is mine. What I eat, how I live. No one else can make that decision for me. So yes, even today, I still take those 5 foods each morning. Sometimes I forget, but I come back. It's not just a habit, it's a way to survive. Part 5. Miracles of the Body. Hope Reborn. Oddly, my memory sharpened as my body healed. Things I used to barely notice: my family's laughter, the scent of spring wind, a child's doodle on the fridge, they all became precious again. It was proof life was returning. Maybe this was the real beginning. One cold winter morning, when my knees usually ached and fingers twitched, I found myself clearing snow from the driveway barehanded. My wife peeked out the window and asked, "Are your hands freezing?" I just smiled. It doesn't hurt. I actually feel good. And in that moment, I truly felt good, both body and soul. My test results kept improving. Liver enzymes neared normal, and tumor size continued to decline. The doctors called it extraordinarily rare, but I knew it wasn't luck. It was my making. So I began sharing this method with others, friends, neighbors, and seniors in my community. Many were skeptical at first, but some tried, and then astonishing results began. There was Mr. Parker. He'd been hospitalized multiple times for elevated liver enzymes. After drinking seaweed juice daily, he said around 2 months. In Dr. Thompson, I wake up feeling clear-headed now. Isn't that strange? 6 months later, His liver function had normalized. Today, at 82, he hikes weekly. "You gave me the best decade of my life," he says, smiling. Then there's Mrs. Johnson, who'd managed high blood pressure for over 20 years. I recommended perilla seed powder. She hesitated. "Is this really better than my meds?" But she gave it a try. 3 months later, her blood pressure dropped. 6 months later, medications were cut in half. 1 year later, she stopped 5 of her 7 daily pills. Now, at 83, she swims weekly travels with her granddaughter full of energy. "That little spoonful of perilla changed my life," she told me years later. That line still fills me with joy. And Mrs. Garcia, with recurring pneumonia and weak immunity, she started daily shiitake powder. She didn't feel a change at first, but that winter, no colds. 6 months later, her immune cell count shot upward. Doctors wanted a repeat scan and still couldn't believe the numbers. She's now 74 and teaches her grandchildren to swim. "That spoonful of shiitake gave me a new life," she said. "It felt simple, yet profound." A miracle is real when shared together. Each of these stories wasn't from a textbook. They were people I met, stories I witnessed. Normal folks, no special genes, no expensive treatments. Just daily habits, consistent and simple. Sticking to it isn't easy in today's world. Persistence is the most powerful medicine. So, I always say change your day and you change your life. But one day alone won't do it. You have to keep going. People expect quick fixes, but real healing is quiet and slow. One day, a hospital doctor softly asked me, "Dr. Thompson, could we share your notes with our team?" And in that moment, I felt something shift. It wasn't just my body healing, it was a healing of ideas. East and West medicine bridging the divide. Soon after, I began teaching this at the local college under a course titled Medicine on the Table. At first, students were skeptical, but by the end of the term, one said quietly as they closed their notebook, "Maybe the most important things are so close to us we can't see them." I smiled and replied, "Yes, miracles might just be hiding in your fridge." Part 6. The transformations I've witnessed. By now, my story wasn't mine alone anymore. I began teaching weekly at the local community college and collaborating with healthcare providers to share what I'd learned about these 5 foods. It evolved into more than just wellness advice. It became a way to preserve one's life. Those who embraced this daily routine with me said the same things. I feel lighter inside. I don't get fatigued like before. I was able to reduce my medications. Each of their words gradually erased the memory of that cold diagnosis I first received. People would sometimes ask Dr. Thompson, "Did your cancer really disappear?" I'd answer honestly, "I can't guarantee every cancer cell is gone. But I've lived 40 years without a recurrence and in good health. This isn't luck or some mystical miracle. It's the result of consistent action and a faith in nature's resilience." One person who left a lasting impression was a gentleman who began the routine at age 69. He declined chemotherapy for terminal stomach cancer and came to see me instead. I was cautious. "This is not a treatment. It's a supplement for recovery." But he said to me, "I don't want a cure. I want to learn how to live." That changed everything for me. We've long focused on defeating disease, yet rarely learned how to live with it or how to communicate with our bodies. He adjusted his diet, took the 5 supplements each morning, and began meditation. 1 year later, he lost weight, yet looked more vibrant. Pain lessened. Cancer remained, but he said, "I'm not afraid of this disease anymore." It actually made me see life more clearly. You might wonder, can just 5 foods really make such a difference? So let me clarify. This isn't a story about miracle foods. It's about the people who create miracles through habits. Food is merely the tool. What matters is the mindset you bring to it. When you eat with intention, to live, your dining table becomes more powerful than a pharmacy. One revelation struck me deeply. Ginseng contains compounds called ginsenosides. Not only do they have anti-cancer properties, but they also reduce mental fatigue and help balance stress hormones. I believe this wholeheartedly because through consistent ginseng use, my mind became calmer. Mental peace, I realized, is far more important than any medicine when it comes to healing. And then there was fermented soybean paste. Initially, I hesitated. The smell was strong and the taste unfamiliar. But learning that gut health is essential to immunity, I embraced it without question. This paste helps balance gut flora and reinforce the intestinal lining. Improved gut health means gentler, more precise immune function. Remarkably, it also lifts your mood. Science shows the gut-brain connection is real. Truly, happiness begins in the gut. At this point, some quietly ask, "So, Dr. Thompson, are you fully cured?" I smile softly and say, "The illness may still linger within me, but it no longer lives in me. I live life. I walk under morning sunlight, teach at college, prepare meals, and joke with my wife. My medicine bottle is empty now, but my kitchen holds seaweed extract, perilla mushrooms, ginseng, and fermented paste. And every day, piece by piece, I rebuild my life gently but surely. Each day, someone gets a diagnosis in a hospital. Someone looks at a family photo with tears. Someone faces the mirror, unable to hold back sobs. To them, I want to say, there is life in your kitchen." Part 7. At 91, I still climb mountains. The number 91 isn't unfamiliar to me. Every year I hear age is just a number. Yes, but I know the weight those years carry. And today, I still climb hills slowly but steadily. I get winded, but I don't stop. Someone once asked me, "Dr. Thompson, how did you live this long?" I laughed and replied, "I started living on the day I almost died." This story is my record from start to finish, and yet it might also be your story. No matter your age, where you live, or what illness you are facing, it doesn't matter. What matters is that right now, you choose to want to live. I still walk before dawn. In the park, the scent of grass greets me first. The wind may be chilly, but it's refreshing. And the sky feels closer than ever. On that path every morning, I tell myself, let me live well today. We doubt too much and trust too little. We ignore our body's signals and rely only on pill instructions. But from my experience, the strongest physician is your own sense of self. You're the person who notices what makes you feel energized and what brings relief. Sometimes I think if I had surrendered on that day at the hospital 40 years ago, none of this would exist. My children would have lost me too early. My wife would have walked the long years alone. But I didn't give up. The spoonful of seaweed, the cup of perilla powder, the quiet mornings with ginseng, the collection of those simple moments became today's me. People often ask, does this really work? I no longer show charts or lab results. Instead, I show my mountain hikes. That's my answer. One day, my grandson asked me, "Grandpa, were you ever afraid of dying?" I paused, then said, "I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of not getting to live." He held me quietly in his arms, and I knew perhaps this story has come to a natural end. I had said everything I intended to say. If you've listened this far, maybe you're about to make a decision. Tomorrow morning, when you open your fridge, remember this: a miracle started with a single spoonful. Day after day, it builds your life again. So please don't wait until it's too late. It's never too late. Your body might be wanting to heal more than you realize. And that first step, though small and silent, can change everything. Right now, your heart might be stirring with surprise, warmth, regret, maybe even hope. All of that is proof you're alive, and being alive means you can still change. I lived 40 extra years with just 5 foods, but the deeper truth is I chose myself every day. Recovery over pain, possibility over surrender, life over death. You can too. Between who you were yesterday and who you become tomorrow, one spoonful can turn it all around. Which path will you take? One. I'll start today. 2. I'll think about it a bit more. Leave a comment. Share this story with someone you care about, family, friends, so they realize they can still choose to survive. Together, we're stronger, and miracles grow when they're shared. Now take a quiet breath in and slowly breathe out. That is the first breath toward changing your tomorrow. Liking and subscribing is your choice, but your health, it's now up to your will. Sleep well tonight. Remember, you're not just alive, you still get to live.